Everybody, it's Soren Baker here on Unique Access, and today we have the honor and the privilege of being joined by Mr. Mixx. Mr. Mixx, thank you for coming through, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm glad to be here.
Man,
glad to be here.
It's been a long time in the making. We were trying to meet up in person, but this Corona thing is making it hard to travel, or has been. So I was like, man, we got to get Mixx on, period. So
yeah, it's making it hard on everybody, you know.
Yeah, and I like your setup you got there, keeping the turntables going.
Yeah, man. You know, got to always try to stay, a step ahead of everybody. Try to make your presentation be the best it could be.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the many reasons why we're talking to you today, man, because obviously people know you from 2 Live Crew and your work with them, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But as we get to talk a lot about your career, you've done so much beyond that, and I think have delivered so much to the game that people either don't know about or don't talk about much, which is
right.
why I'm very excited to be able to get to that. But before we get to that, we got to lay the groundwork with 2 Live Crew and even before that. So one thing that I've read about, heard about, and always wanted to learn more about from you was I'd heard that you had been stationed in England and you happened to meet Afrika Bambaataa in the early 80s. When he
well, it was Afrika Islam that I didn't meet him, but I went to go see them. When I was stationed in England, that was like in 82. A lot of the New York acts would come to London to do exhibitions. So the Rocksteady Crew breakdance group came over, and Afrika Islam was DJing for them at this event. So I'm out in the audience, before I see them and see him, I'm a hip hop fan, from what it is that was going on. I think by that time, the Buffalo Gals record was out, Planet Rock was out, Play at Your Own Risk. All of the Tommy Boy top records were out at that time. So all we had when I was in England, I went over there before hip hop actually took off in the States. So when I left like January 82. It was going on the East Coast, but it wasn't happening anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? So being from California, going into the military, and then getting stationed over to England, I had never seen a 2 turntables and mixer setup ever before. So the only thing that was close to that maybe is if you went to a radio station and there was a turntable set up at the radio station. You never really seen that kind of stuff on TV. Maybe the closest thing is Saturday Night Fever or Thank God It's Friday or something like that, where you would actually seek some kind of setup. But, if you didn't go to see the movies, it's quite obvious you wouldn't know the setup. So when they actually, I was always wondering how the scratching was being done because we weren't getting the videos over there in England either. This is before MTV was out or anything like that. Buffalo Gals with world famous Supreme Team hadn't been in a position to where it could be seen because there was no video shows to show it. Maybe the video was done, but if it wasn't a New York thing or whatever, and maybe there was some, small broadcasts in London that you might be able to see it, but the rest of the world really couldn't see it. So you were imagining how is this stuff actually being done? So when they came out and did the exhibition, I used to get these records from New York. They said that people are spinning on their heads and on their backs. I didn't believe what they was talking about. I said, how the hell can somebody do that? So when I actually go to the thing and they're doing what it is, I said, wow, okay, that's what it is. And then I seen Afrika Islam scratching, looking for the perfect beat, just kept scratching, beat this, beat this, and all of that. So I'm saying, oh, okay, so that's how it goes. So I didn't realize that a record, a hand was on the record and a hand was on the fader, you know what I mean? So, and I didn't, like I said, you never really knew how the turntable setup actually was. So now with my imagination, I'm gonna show you how I used to think, I had a little record player in my barracks and I would try to put the needle on the record and instead of just naturally doing something like this, I'm up here trying to figure out how I can get the thing to spin back and, all of that. So it's obvious I hadn't seen what it was.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think I'm a few years younger than you, but when in 85, I had heard rap before 85, but when I first got my first real tape of it, and I heard like I Need a Beat and Roxanne, Roxanne, and these songs that had scratching on it.
Right.
I heard it before. I'd never heard like those type of records where it was so prominent. And I was just like, I had no idea what it was. I didn't know if that was an instrument. Kind of like you. I didn't know how it was being made or how it worked. Nothing.
Right, exactly.
And like you were saying, it's funny because the videos too, I'd seen a Rapper's Delight video, but I hadn't really seen many other videos until like 86 really. Mm-hmm. So it was funny that you and I had that same like, what's going on? Right. But the funny thing is, that's one of the main things that drew me, because I love drums and I love the scratching. That's what really drew me in a lot of ways to rap. And then of course the stories, but the sound of it was so unusual and like crazy. So what in addition to what you've already said, what was Afrika Islam in particular doing that was so memorable and changed your life?
Basically, like I said, when I seen what it was that he was doing, I had been in band all my life. You know, I played saxophone from 3rd grade all the way through high school, so I already knew about music. So I equated to what Islam was doing with the turntables like playing the guitar. One hand's doing one thing and the other hand's doing something else. So, and then when I was seeing how his hands was moving, I said, okay, he's making the sound go off of the fader, and when he's pulling his hand back, he's pushing the fader the other way, so you can't hear it come back. So I could visually figure out what he was doing. But if I didn't have no musical knowledge and musical understanding of how sound works or any of that kind of stuff, it probably would have went over my head. So just as soon as I seen that, my next military paycheck, I went and got me 2 turntables, but they weren't no 1200s. They were just regular turntables. And I found a little makeshift mixer that you could plug, the turntables into. They were all up and down faders. They didn't have a crossfader at that time. Well, there were mixers that had crossfaders, but it was just out of the, tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, that little area. Right. But anywhere else, you just couldn't find them like that.
And then what, you said you played saxophone. This is all in Riverside growing up?
I grew up in Santa Ana, which is maybe 40 miles outside of Los Angeles. I, went to school in Santa Ana, and my parents moved from Santa Ana to Corona, which is right next door to Riverside. And I finished up high school in Corona. But all through that time, I played in band, and even actually in junior high school, we actually had a jazz band where we would play anything. We could play anything that was playing on the radio, anything. We were only 12, 13 years old, but we're able to pick up what it is that we're hearing on these songs, and are actually able to play. I actually played the solo for Pick Up the Pieces Average White Band at 13 years old.
Wow.
So I've always been in the zone of music.
And then how and what drew you so much to the 808?
Well, the 808 situation came from the fact of me, like I said, all we had was magazines and articles and things like that. And I read an article about how Planet Rock was created. They, said which instruments were used and all of that. So I wasn't really hip on drum machines until they start speaking about it in these articles. I knew that, before I went overseas, I had heard Kraftwerk, music, but I didn't know how it was being, made. You heard, back in those days, you had Cameo, the Barcades, all of these funk bands can function, they're playing real instruments. But Kraftwerk, it sounded like it was computerized music. You just didn't really know how it was being actually made. You know what I'm saying? So when I read the article, it was saying that they used a Fairlight keyboard, which was what Stevie Wonder used back then. It cost maybe like $10,000, $12,000 for one of these Fairlight machines. And then they said it was a Roland TR-808 drum machine. So I went to a music store in London to see what it actually looked like. So, and like I said, I have knowledge of music. It was easy to learn how to program it, along with the fact that at that time when we was over there, I had a pop locking group on the military base, and we had been in a couple of different contests. We had won second place in a contest, and we got like $500 worth of studio equipment. So out of that equipment, I got some microphones, this, that, and other, and there was a Roland 606 drum machine. So that was available to be purchased in that amount of money. So I learned how to program the Roland 606, and then turns out it's the same kind of programming it was to do the 808 drum machine. So I was able to program it when I actually seen one for real at this London shop. And then at that time, I was able to understand that the sounds that I'm hearing on the Planet Rock record actually were all of the drum sounds that's in the 808 drum machine. So I was really fascinated by that record. We had, pop lock routines to it and all that stuff. So, I pretty much know every ounce of the record. So that's what kind of got me on the zone of that, because once Planet Rock came out, then Play at Your Own Risk came out, then Electric Kingdom came out, and a couple of other records, along with, what was it? Between the Sheets, Isley Brothers, and all of the SOS band stuff, and Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing. They were all used at Roland 808 drum machine. I knew in 1983 that it was going to be the most profound drum machine ever. I just knew it. It was on too many hit-sounding records, too many hits.
And then given that you have a background of actually playing instruments, was it odd to try to get into like a machine as opposed to an instrument, actual drums, or you just looked at it like that's what was happening?
No, well, it was cool to me because it was like you're actually able to hear a sound that's coming off of this record, and you got the actual machine in front of you that's making these sounds happen. So it was extremely interesting to me. So I would get like, I remember when I was testing out the 808 machine in the store, I had programmed the drum beat for what the record was at that time. Mastodon Committee's record, Funk Box Party, which is what Master P and them redid, make them say, it's an original record from off of Enjoy Records back in the early 80s. So there was a whole bunch of different drum breakdowns and all that kind of stuff. And I could hear those sounds that was on that record right in this machine. So it was easy for me to be able to figure out to program it once I learned how to do the 606. So once I did that, I said, okay, I know that I can program like these guys that are making these records. I just don't know how to make no records. I at least know how to program the same thing of what they did in these machines.
Okay. And then what did you learn about the rap side of things in England, if anything? Or was it mainly?
Well, there was no rappers really. There was like this one rap record that, I was lightweight involved with the people that had actually did it. It was this record called London Bridge, and it was by a guy named Nutriment. It was on Jive Records. And I didn't go to the studio session. I was still, like I said, I was in the military. I was on a 2 days on, 2 days off schedule. So at the time that they had the session, I wasn't able to go to the session. So this guy's name was Nutriment, and I guess he was part of the punk rock scene that was over there in England, all of the Boy George stuff, anything that, now they had a hell of a scene when it came to that type of music in the early 80s. It was a big deal over there, but rapping wasn't really part of it outside of maybe like some stuff that, you know, that was kind of like similar to what Grandmaster Flash Furious 5 and them was doing at that time. So, but it was just little sprinkles and stuff. It wasn't no heavy duty stuff, just little line here, little line there. So, you know, like most places outside of the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, you know, Philadelphia, you know, it was a wasteland. Nobody knew how to make no rap records. Nobody even knew how to even think about messing with it outside of emulating what they heard what Grandmaster Flash was doing. That was it, and Sugar Hill Gang.
What year did you end up back in California?
I got back to California in '84, and once I got to California, I was stationed in Riverside, which is not far from where my mom and them lived, and Corona's only like 20 miles. So I was back on my home turf. Things had changed drastically. Guys had turntables. People were doing parties. There was this group from LA that would come out to Riverside and do parties. It was called Uncle Jam's Army, and they had this dude, Egyptian Lover, as they DJ. And, you know, he was the one that I seen in California. That was probably like the first DJ I seen in California out there in Riverside area. And then there was another guy that I ended up doing some parties and stuff with. His name was Byron Davis. He had this thing called Players Productions in Riverside. So the little parties that he was giving, you know, he wasn't on no BS. I guess he lived near the military base. So, you know, I told him who I was and, you know, that I knew about the stuff and this, that, and other. I just came back from England, blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes he would let me spin, you know. He didn't really trip off of, you know, like, oh, no, you can't do this, and, you know, whatever. He allowed me to, you know, to spin at a couple of his parties and things like that. And we became good friends based off of that. I guess, you know, I was, like I say, we lived not too far from each other. I was on the base and he lived right outside of the base.
And then what were you playing at the time?
The records?
Yeah.
That was being played, you know, I was a old school, you know, early hip hop head of what was going on, the underground hip hop of New York. There was no such thing as a, you know, real hip hop presence in LA at that time. Outside of, yeah, I think you had the Ice-T record.
When that.
Yeah, that. Then Uncle Jam's Army and them actually put a record out maybe like 6 months after I had got back. That was called Dollar Free. That was probably, you know, that was my favorite record of theirs. And then later on, like '85, LA Dream Team them showed up. Bobby Jimmy and the Critters and all these other little records start coming out of Los Angeles. That was, you know, that was out of Macola.
Right. So getting
those records along with, you know, the East Coast underground hip hop scene, the Disco 4, you know, Fantasy 3, CD 3, all of these underground rap groups. And I learned a lot just by, you know, by learning New York culture through those records, because it was definitely different slang than what we was accustomed to hearing, different things. And it's funny, when I was on my way coming back to California, there was a buddy of mine at the military base in England. His younger brother was a DJ, and he had 1200s, and, you know, and he had, you know, a mixer that had a crossfader on it. I said, wow. So he hooked me up with his brother. So when I was flying back from England, when you come back from overseas, you're gonna come into New York. You're gonna fly into New York, and then you get dispatched to wherever it is that you're going from that point. So I was able to fly into New York, meet him. He lived in the Bronx. We went down on 42nd Street with the, you know, my leave money and all of that stuff. And I was able to get, you know, 2 1200 turntables and a mixer. It was called an ELI mixer. And we went back to his house. I was so shook about, because we had to get on the train in Manhattan, 42nd Street with these 2 turntable boxes and take the train from downtown all the way up to the Bronx. And then we had to walk like 2 blocks with these turntables.
That's not nice.
I didn't even think we was gonna make it to his house. I thought we was gonna get robbed or get clunked in the head for him or whatever. But we made it. And when he showed me his setup in his bedroom, and he was the first one to show me how to really. He's the first one. He introduced me to breakbeat records. So you got to have 2 of these records, and you got to have you got to be able to bring the records back, in a certain amount of time, this, that, and other. Because I knew how to do that, but I was doing it with an up and down mixer. So since I didn't have no fader, I had to, if one fader is up, the other one's down. When I go to the other record, I'd have to do that. And then, let me move this microphone out the way. And to get to this turntable, I had to do that. So, I didn't know anything about a crossfader. So he said, man, the crossfader is going to allow you to control 2 records at the same time. You know what I mean? You'll be able to do a lot more stuff than what it is that you know how to do. So because at first I was just scratching with my left hand. I had my turntable set over like regular like this, but I would go from this turntable and then go to that turntable and then go to that. So he said, you're going to have to learn how to scratch with your other hand.
So you're left-handed?
No. I was able to control the fader good. I'm right-handed, so I was able to control the fader better with my right hand and rub the records with my left.
Gotcha.
So, but dude said to me that you're gonna have to learn how to do the, you're gonna have to learn how to manipulate the records with your right hand also. So basically that's how I got into being able to go back and forth on the turntables and was practicing. And this guy's name, I can't remember his real name, but his DJ name was Tretch DJ CB. So since I end up becoming a protege of his, that's where I get the Tretch DJ from him. So I was Tretch DJ Mr. Mixx.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what made
there's too much information.
Well, what made you go from that to like, hey, let's form a group and actually make records? Because I think it's, like you said, in the LA area, but even far out like Riverside, which people should understand is an hour away, but 60 miles or whatever. It's
right.
Like, it's not like that's next door. It's
right.
It's a ways away. So what gave you the idea, the confidence, the belief that, oh man, I can start making records with my friends?
Well, at the time, we had like little, when I was in England, there was, little guys that was trying to imitate what Grandmaster Flash then was doing, the Cold Crush Brothers, all of that over there. But when I got back to California, it's obvious I didn't know anybody that was into it. But the fact of me being the only person on the military base with turntables in their barracks caused a lot of commotion in the barracks. So I worked in the dining hall in the hospital, and all of the hospital personnel was in this one particular barracks. And at the time, Chris Wong, he worked in outpatient records in the hospital. So, one day he came through, through the lunch line, and I'm up there flipping burgers and all of that. He said, man, I hear you got some turntables in your dorm room. I said, yeah. He's asked me where was I from, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. He said he was from New York, and, I'm really into the rap stuff, this, that, and the other. I wrote some rhymes. I was doing some stuff with some guys in Illinois. He was stationed at another base. March Air Force Base was his second base. He was stationed in Illinois first. Okay. So when he transferred from Illinois and came to March Air Force Base, that's how we met. We met, through the child line. And what he started doing, he started coming to my room, and we started, just listening to rap records, trying to imitate what it is that we're hearing on the records. We're seeing these records that's coming from, like I say, Egyptian Lover and Bobby Jimmy and all these other people that was out of McCullough Records. But we seen that, they gave the information of McCullough Records where it was in Hollywood, phone number and everything that's on the actual label. So once we start messing around and start being able to feel like we could compete with emulating what it is that we're hearing on these underground records and all of that stuff, we decided to, you know, do a recording at a real studio and see what would happen.
And then how and when did Yuri get in the mix then?
Oh yeah, now he heard of, like I say, he lived in our barracks also. So, you know, it was like news to, there's some guy that's up there that's scratching and doing all of this stuff in the barracks. So my name was ringing around the base. So he met up with me and we started, you know, he was a lot more versed than Chris was at that time. You know, he definitely was part like a DJ crew and all of that stuff in New York before he came into the service. So me and him hit it off very well. And, you know, his stuff was more so like, I wouldn't call it conscious rap. I would just call it the kind of rapping that they was doing back in those days. You know, when Melly Mel and them came out with the message, everybody was on the trend of hipping you to the real. So, you know, Electric Kingdom is, you know, it ain't conscious rap, but it's talking about looting and shooting, stabbing and grabbing, talking about the different things, the ills of society that's going on. So that was the style at that time. You know, What People Do for Money was a big record at that time. They're talking about social ills and different things. So that's the page that he was on, talking about, you know, or going that zone or that lane with making records. Because nobody else really thought about, you know, talking about their car or this or that. That part was way down the road. Nobody was making no records like that at all.
Yeah. So that's where the revelation then comes in, right?
Right, exactly. It was, you know, we basically, you know, we came up with the name 2 Live Crew as in like TOO, like we're the livest group ever. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, but since the styles were different, he did, you know, Revelation all by himself. And the flip side, 2 Live, is the song that, you know, me and Chris did by ourselves. You know, you notice there's no scratching on Revelation. I just did the drum programming, and we had a keyboard guy come in to play some little keyboard parts over how we, you know, programmed the record.
Yeah, it's amazing thinking back that there's such a difference in the 2 records, but even as we fast forward just a little bit so I can mention it while we're talking about it, that was always the thing about 2 Live Is What We Are that always blew me away, was that there was only like 2 or 3 sexual records. The rest of it was more like the 2 Live beatbox, you know, was
right. Exactly.
The perception of it is one thing, but when you listen to the record, it's totally different.
Right.
And I think 2 Live Crew is similar, even though it's not quite as dramatic. Like, I always felt that way about Too Short, because he had so much conscious music and so much about the streets and so much this, and he had a couple sex songs, but those are the ones that people, that's what they wanted.
Right, exactly.
But he had, you know, he had It's Your Life, he had Cocaine, you know, all those records that Short had early.
Right.
That were nothing about sex. But anyway.
Right, exactly.
But isn't the 2 Live, that's where you mentioned Luke Skywalker and, or Chris, I should say, mentioned, you guys mentioned him. And do you know, did that directly have an effect of him eventually reaching out to you?
Yes, definitely did, because that was the DJ name that Luther Campbell was going by with him in Ghetto Style DJs, and the record showed up in you know, in the record pool that they had, and the guy that worked records from Macola told him, you know about the record, or when he was playing through the records, he heard that thing, that little line that Chris said, and they liked the beat of the record. They was playing that side more so than playing the Revelation side. They played both of them, but they played the other side mostly because of that line, like Luke Skywalker, I got the force. Every time I rhyme, I am the boss. He said, yeah, man, they talking about me. They, you know, he just bullshitting, you know. So he actually reached out to us. You know, the phone number that was on there was my mom's phone number, because at that time there's no such thing as you know, cell phones and all of that stuff. You know, people that was in the streets may have had pages. I didn't have no pager or anything like that to be contacted. So the phone number was to my mom's house. So he calls my mom's house and leaves a message of, wanting to do a show with us and this, that, and the other. And I thought she was joking. I thought he was joking. I mean, who's gonna, a guy named Luke Skywalker from Florida is calling you about doing a show, and we ain't never did no shows outside of DJing parties and things like that. We had never did no actual show before. So it's just, you can't make this shit up. So,
yeah, it's preposterous. And plus, like you said, back then, it wasn't like there was a way to research it and the industry was so small. It was just like, what?
Right. And we didn't take ourselves from the standpoint, we were just making the record. We know that we're in the military, man. We just did it really more so to be able to do it because we felt like it's something that we could do. We didn't know, what it was going to actually be about or what was going to actually happen. We seen the address from Macola Records on a Uncle Jam's Army record or a Bobby Jimmy record or something. And we called down there and said, hey, man, we got a record. We want to bring it down there to you guys and put it out. Yeah, bring it on down. Bring it on down. So we went out there to L.A., drove out there and went to see Don McMillan. And he just took the record from us. No questions asked, gave us some papers to sign for it to be in their system. And that was that. We went back to the military base and they kept sending invoices after invoice after invoice after invoice of records being sent this place, that place, whatever. We was getting a lot of invoices going to Florida though, but they never sent no damn checks. We're seeing 300 records going to Miami, Florida. 300 records went to St. Louis. 200 records went to Philadelphia. And all. So the records are moving, at least invoices are being made, but none of that money is coming to us. It just shows, that something is happening. So we kind of had an idea that it wasn't totally out of the way that somebody would call, but we never expected it.
So what, did you ever ask Macola what was going on with some money, some royalties, or?
No, because we were so green, we didn't have an understanding of how the process really went. We were just happy to be able to say that, we was able to come back to the base with 2 boxes of records and be able to show people, yeah, we got a record. We made a record.
Gotcha. When you did go down to Miami, obviously Luke, even then, before Two Live Crew, was very entrepreneurial, it seems. So did you guys early on, when you were just starting to go down there to do these shows, did you end up talking to him that early about business, or did that happen after 5 or 6 trips, or what?
Yeah, it happened after a few trips going back and forth. When we went down there to do the show, we didn't even negotiate a price to do the show. We just went. He said he was gonna fly us out there, get us hotel rooms, to do the show and this, that, and other. We didn't talk about no money. He ain't talk about no money either. Come to think about it, he didn't ask us what we wanted or any of that. He could just tell that we were just totally green at what it was that was happening. And because like I said, he had been dealing with a lot of other people in New York, dealing with the booking agencies up there, booking, guys, Tilo Rock, Divine Sounds, Mantronics, all of these guys was coming to Florida to do shows. So he was in the zone of doing that already. We were just the next ones in the queue that he reached out to see to do a show with. So they got our record hot in the marketplace, and you come down and do a show, and that was that. We did 2 shows, one on a Friday and one on a Saturday, and we went back. We went back home. I think I stayed there for like a week with him, just hanging out, because at that time I was already out of the military. My date of separation had already came up. We had went out there in August. My date of separation was in August, but Chris and Yuri had to go back. They were still in the military. So I was living at my mother's house at that time, going back and forth to Miami. We went down there for New Year's. Still didn't ask for what we was gonna get in the show or anything like that. Just going, just to be going. And we doing our little record on stage and stuff, and it just seemed so genuine and so authentic. It didn't seem like of course, like I say, I didn't have an understanding of what to ask for, what not to ask for. It was just the opportunity of being able to say that we traveled somewhere and did something. So, like in that later that year, '86, like around February '86, we decided to do an appreciation record for Luke and them and the ghetto style DJs. And that's where the record Throw the D shows up, because it was a dance they was doing at the parties. So, like I said, at that time, Luke and them, they wasn't making no records. They wasn't even thinking about making no records. They would make up all kind of dances and stuff at the parties and stuff that they did, but they weren't thinking about recording no records. So there was some local guys that came up with a record called the Ghetto Jump, but that was one of their dances that they created at the party. So they was playing that record, and they were trying to do stuff with these guys, and it didn't really work out with continually trying to do stuff with them. So when this Throw the D dance, we're bearing witness to it being done, and just the culture of Miami was just way different than anything that I'd ever knew about. Chris might have been lightweight understanding of it because he's from Trinidad. So, he's an island person. So all of the kind of different records and things that they was doing down there, he was kind of more accustomed to it because they played a lot of reggae and this, that, and the other, you know what I'm saying? And so Chris was up on that aspect. So when we did the actual record, we came back to March Air Force Base. There was a studio called, I think it was called Studio One in Riverside, and we recorded the Throw the D record, based off of what it is that we seen with the dancing and this, that, and the other. And, all of the Dolomite scratching and all that stuff came from the fact that I used to make mixtapes on the bass, and I would scratch up the Dolomite stuff and Fred Sanford and Aunt Esther and all of that stuff on these little mixtapes, but I hadn't really thought about, using that stuff in records for real until this Throw the D song came along, because it totally fit in with the Miami narrative of how they was at the parties and all of that. So that's how the comedy stuff became an issue of being, part of our shtick of it was kind of like, it was just based off of what we seen on that one record. I mean, on that one dance.
And then is that when things gravitated more toward the dance side even before it started to get profane? Is that when Yuri decided to leave, or what happened?
Well, he decided to leave based off of the fact that I guess it was, too many people that was wanting to clamor around. I guess us bragging that we had a record on the bass, it made more people want to be involved, and he felt like everybody shouldn't be involved. And, why are we doing, you guys are going to the studio and ain't telling me that y'all going into the studio. I just looked at it like we was just doing stuff. We wasn't really overly organized or anything like that. We didn't have, no contracts with each other. We was just doing stuff. We were in the military. We were just doing jobs. You know what I'm saying? We was doing regular jobs. I was the only one that was out. I was, still, able to come back and forth to the base and see these guys and all of that. But we were just doing stuff and just was hoping that, something could actually be something. It was really more a hobby than actually doing something that generated income. We hadn't seen no money before. Right. Out of all of the stuff, you know what I'm saying? And then when we did the record with Luke, the record started taking off based off of the fact that they the ones who came up with the Throw the D dance. So it was, a major amplification of what was going on in Miami. And at that time in Miami, there were no rap records. MC Shy D had a couple of records that was being distributed by Foresight. But beyond that, there was really nobody in the marketplace that really had records that was actually like Marquis making records. You know what I mean? This guy, MC that was out of the same company with Shy D, the guy that owned Foresight, MC is his son. So he did electronic sounding records. Had Bass Rock Express and a couple of other things, but that was before it actually became a so-called genre of music. It was just, the stuff that was going on in Florida at that time was like records that were already a record somewhere else, and there was an offshoot of what that record was.
Okay.
So like say for instance, Bass Rock Express is off of Trans Europe Express. So it's like offshoot songs of something else. It was never no original stuff that was really being done in that way.
Right. So then, back before we get back to where we are now, I wanted to say, when you were doing the stuff with Macola, since you put out only a couple of things there, did you literally only go to the office like 2 or 3 times, or did you go there several times?
Maybe like 4 or 5 times. We would, can we get some more records to take back to the base? Stuff like that. They give us, a box of records was 50 records. They give us 100 records. Go ahead on, go ahead and take them, because they know that they should be used as promotional goods. And the funny thing about Macola, they were thoroughly self-contained. I mean, right there was the office, the pressing plant. They could get mastered right in there. It was like a full-fledged operation. So if they got records as a return, all they would do is they had a stamper that would crush the inside of the label, so it would be like a big hole, like a donut in it, and then just crush the rest of the vinyl and reuse the vinyl. So it was they were just totally winning.
Wow. Now, did you see like Lonzo Williams up there ever, or Eazy-E, or Jerry Heller?
Yeah, matter of fact, I seen Lonzo and his people up there, and they was hot about something. They had some one big dude, bodyguard type dude or whatever, and I remember he hit Don McMillan's desk so hard that the desk shook, and Don just sitting up there like, "You better not put your hands on me. You can be mad all you want, but you better not put your hands on me." So I bear witness to little stuff like that, but I didn't know to what degree or why they was upset. I didn't really know. I don't know if they was coming up there to get paid and they was bullshitting them about getting paid and all of that stuff. I didn't know that part of the movie at that time. I was just up there trying to pick some records up and go back to the base.
So then how did the business discussion with you guys and Luke start to either try to help you find a label or to him to start his own label? How did that work?
Well, that's funny that you say that, because when we was down there, I was a big Pretty Tony fan. When I hear music and all the records that he had out, the dance party sounding records that he had. So Luke actually took us around over there to where he was, and we took some pictures over there. They let us hear the new Trenier record that he was working on and this and that. And they were lightweight interested in wanting to work with us. But like I said, we was all the way in California at that time, and it did. I guess for him, it didn't make any sense to do it, because at the time when we did the Throw the D record, we didn't know who was going to put the record out. So Luke took the record around to all of the different little offshoot record companies that was doing these, makeshift records, and nobody wanted the record. So he decided to press the record up himself. And, we thought of the thing, Luke Skywalker Records. At that time, Marquis had started working with us right after the record had got finished. I knew Marquis from Riverside. He would be in rap battles. That's how I know about him. And then he was also a friend of Rodney O. They had a group called the Caution Crew when they were in high school. So Mark had actually made a record before I did. So, and I told him that if there's any chance of us doing anything down the road, that I'll hook you up. I want you to be a part of what it is that we're doing. So when Yuri left the group, stopped messing with things, I reached out to him. He was all the way back in New York with family in Rochester, and he caught a flight and came back out to California because his mom lived in California anyway. And we started working on different records and things like that, because we already knew that we had to connect with Luke in Miami to go back and forth and do stuff. So, and the way that the business started, everything was always on me. I asked Luke, would he be my manager? Because I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know that he didn't know a whole bunch, but I could tell by what it was that he was doing. He knew way more than me, and we were having a successful situation with each other. Very cordial. He was always great towards me, So I asked him, would you manage us? And he said, yeah, let's do it. So he start taking the records around, and he start going to seminars and different things about learning about the music business. He's taking me along with him to learn with him, but I'm bullshitting and not going to the meetings. I'm out chasing girls while he's in there, in the seminars, learning what it is that he needs to learn. But he never, to this day, he never called me out about that. He never, said, hey, man, what the fuck are you doing, man? We're up here not to be bullshitting, we're up here to be doing. He never went that route with me. But he was 4 years older than me, so he probably just looked at it like, I'm going to learn this shit. The guy knows how to do what I need him to do, so maybe he don't really need to be in here with this stuff. So he was always on the business aspect of what it was that was going on. Not necessarily probably for us, but for himself, because he was already an entrepreneur that was, trying to make some things happen. But he just didn't think that, he would be coming into the record business.
And so, based on what you had seen from people in England, in California, now going to Miami, how would you describe what the ghetto style DJs and Luke were doing versus what you had seen in different parts of the world?
I thought they was backwards. I really did, because the kind of DJing that they were doing wasn't the DJing that I was seeing other people do. They're pulling the fader down and talking over the records and bring the fader back up. And then what they would do, what the thing with them was a guy being a personality in the party. So if, if they play Rock the Bells, for instance, right? They would change up the words to the song. They'll pull the fader down and say they little shit in the space of them turning the music down, and then bring the record back in when, for whatever catchphrase that was on the actual record. So they would switch up. That was what made their DJ style a particular entity. So it was, everybody would know the words to the song, but if you switched up the words in a certain slick way, that gave you a little more prominence in the actual party. So that's what kind of stuff they was doing. They didn't know nothing about hardly no scratching, none of that stuff. They was just totally off the grid when it came to that. They may have got fascinated when guys from New York would come and do the stuff. They didn't, but they never were fascinated enough to want to learn it. None of the ghetto style DJs guys was like that. All they would do, they'd put the record on, cue it up, they're listening to headphones and find where it is and stop it and let it be right there. And then when it comes on, hey, we about to do this thing. And then they'll just start the record off like that. They wouldn't even push the record with their hands. It would just be, them queuing it up, stopping the record, and it just be right there at 9 o'clock. As soon as it kicks on, and then that's it. So that's the kind of DJing they were doing. So I really thought that they was ass backwards, with what it was they was doing, and I hadn't been to any other southern states or cities or any of that. So, shit, if that's what all of these motherfuckers is doing down here, this might be the best place for us to be able to expound on what it is that we're doing. So Chris was able to get an early release out of the service, and in May of that year, and we drove across and relocated.
I know also, since Luke was bringing a lot of artists down, I know I'm friends with and had interviewed and talked to and spent a lot of time with Schoolie D over the years. And he had told me he had spent a lot of time in Miami and with Luke and doing shows and would stay down there.
Right.
So what did you, since his music, obviously being from Philadelphia, but then also cussing and being a gangster and all this stuff, like what did you see with Schoolie that was different and maybe affected you in some way, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, his record was a motherfucker, and the funniest thing about it was the drum machine that he used was a Roland 909. I didn't necessarily like the sounds out of the 909, but the way that he had the echoes and the post production of how the record was being mixed, based off of me knowing what those original sounds sound like, I said, wow, that shit sounds good, real good. And he talking that gangster shit on the record. Nobody had a record like that before him. You know what I'm saying? So he pretty much set the precedence of actually doing that. And Ice-T went behind him with 6 in the morning, and other people start mimicking the style of what it is that he did. And we met him. We actually was it was a Schoolie D and 2 Live Crew show. That's how we met.
That's crazy. And he having the first record company as a rapper with Schoolie D Records, which he started in like '83. Mm-hmm. I always thought in very different ways he and Luke had some similarities of being very early to understanding the business side of making the records, but obviously they went very different paths in a lot of ways. But well, with all that being said, Schoolie, in addition to the Gangster, had some conscious and political stuff even on PSK.
Right.
So given that you guys had the revelation, but the 2 Live Beatbox was really the one that was taken off, did Luke or how did you guys decide to be like, no, we need to stick with Party and then later sex stuff?
No, it wasn't really no decision. It was really the effect of what the Throw the D record did.
Okay.
That kind of cemented it, because it was a record that I, wanted to do as an appreciation for Luke and the Ghetto Style DJs bringing us out there, to do shows and helping us, move along to do whatever the hell we was gonna do. But Luke probably knew that it was gonna buy, because basically it was a combination of a couple of things. It was the dance they used to do on the party, and then at the height of the party, they would always play the breakdown to Dance to the Drummer's Beat, and that's when everybody would go crazy in the party.
The Trouble Funk record?
No. Dance to the Drummer's Beat. R. Kelly, not R. Kelly. Herman Kelly.
Okay.
Let's dance to the Drummer's Beat. That record. So they would play that record. So that was integrated into the actual Throw the D record. So it was just so many parts that made it become what it became. The bass in the record, the tempo of the record. Like I say, was fast. Dance to the Drummer's Beat, was up tempo. So it was an easy situation to do.
Okay. And then what did you notice with Yuri leaving and Marquis coming? How did the dynamics of the group kind of shift or evolve at that point?
It kind of stayed the same, because Yuri was a slick talker. He was a New York guy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, crazy personality. He wasn't wild like how Mark was, but he still had he had a good stage presence. He was very sure of himself. All of that stuff. So the narrative of Mark coming in versus him going out, it wasn't really no change, because when Mark came along, he was 4 years younger than me. So he was just being a young fire pisser. He was kind of like, at the time, he was like, vetted to be like a LL type. You know what I'm saying? He was always up on fashion. I think he might have been the first one that I seen that had some shell toe Adidas, but instead of buying a whole bunch of different colors of Adidas, he would just buy a whole bunch of pairs of different color shoelaces and take the shoelaces out, and now you got another flare of sneakers because you switched out the colors of the Adidas. Now instead of you having just black and white Adidas, now you got some black and white Adidas with orange shoestrings in them or blue shoestrings in them or whatever. So he was always on that, when it came to clothes and you know, that kind of stuff. He was that guy.
And then how and when and why did the spelling of the name change?
Well, it was always the number 2, but we meant it as TOO. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We just put the 2 up there just for shits and giggles. But it was supposed to mean like, we the livest group ever.
Okay. Gotcha. And then given that there's such an age difference with everybody, how would you describe your relationship with Luke and then Luke's relationship, say, with Marquis or even Fresh Kid Ice? Did they have how would your relationship change or depend on who you were with, or how did that go?
It was different. I can't really say how Luke and Chris were. But Luke and Mark was around each other a lot. Mark would always be in the mix of what it was going on. Me and Luke, we were great as far as, figuring out what kind of records we were going to do, what kind of business was going to happen, this, that, and the other. But I always felt like, Luke had, he was older. He had another set of friends that he already had in Miami. And it always seemed to me like I'm the chick you dragging along on a date. And I got to find out or figure out who all these people are. It was just an uncomfortable thing for me, so I really didn't hang out with them all that much. But when it came to going to the studio, things like that, we was all the way 100, you know what I mean? And anytime that he wanted to, go get something to eat or whatever, this, that, and other, we go do those types of things. But like I say, the Cats was like 4 or 5 years older than me. That, a lot of his friends was in the streets at that time. And then, you had the football player guys that, that played for University of Miami that were, they were younger than me, but I still didn't have no real rapport with them. He had the rapport with them.
Right. Okay.
And it was, like I said, cultural differences too. Miami was way different, than what it was that I was raised up on being in California. It was just different.
Mm-hmm.
But the little ghetto style DJ guys that was like in high school, I kind of gravitated a little more with them because they gravitated to us based on us making records and, that kind of thing. So that's what that was.
Okay. And then with Throw to D's success, how did you guys, end up going from, hey, we're making a couple singles here and there to like, let's do an album for real?
Well, that was the thing. Throw to D was a solid situation for 10 months. That one single. And the thing of it, as the single was starting to get notoriety and starting to branch to other parts of Florida and other parts of the South, we seen that we had something. And before we actually did the album, when we start doing other shows like with Run DMC and a couple other different people, we had We Want Some Pussy programmed in the 808 drum machine. I would have my 2 turntables, the mixer, the 808 drum machine for our shows. So there was other songs that was programmed that was part of our show. 2 Live Is What We Are, and We Want Some Pussy was programmed in the drum machine. So that was like part of our show also before we actually made the recordings of them.
Oh, wow. Okay. And because thinking back around that era, like that and Freaky Tales were probably the first ones that I was like, whoa, that's kind of, what is that? But what made that something that you guys were like, oh yeah, let's just say that on a record?
Well, that was like a chant that they would say like in the club. I mean, the We Want Some Pussy was something that Luke and them used to say, like I say, doing the talk over DJ and stuff, call and response stuff.
Okay.
That's how that came about. And then, Mark and Chris put lyrics to that little catchphrase.
And then you've seen the different crowd, club, different things going on. What did you notice about the call and response that made it so infectious to people that later became such a big thing for everybody to do.
Well, it just seemed like, you know, it's just like I said, the one thing I will give them credit for is that you had, if you was a DJ at that time, you had to have over the top vocal personality, because that's all they was doing. You know, they would say little different things over the records. They'll pull the music down, say their little thing, but they'll bring the music back on beat. You know what I'm saying? They're just, you know, it's almost like with a DJ just bringing some of the music out to they would be doing those types of things, saying words in between it. So it was kind of slick what they were doing. It just was different to me. It wasn't something that I wasn't a vocal personality like how I am now back then. I was just, you know, concentrating on making sure that my scratches was tight and that my beats were tight. That was pretty much it. But the call and response stuff, it let me know that it was a big deal because he was getting, you know, he was getting response with those types of things. So I knew that that was going to be a cool thing when we did stuff like at shows and things like that. So, you know, we just incorporated it into, you know, the record making aspect too.
All right. Well, there it is. Well, Mr. Mixx, man, we barely scratched the surface, so we're going to have to come back with parts 2, 3, 4, and 5. But yeah, man, it's great talking with you to get this first stuff in the can, so we can, you know, start explaining why what you did with that 2 Live Crew and everything else is so phenomenal. So we really appreciate you coming through, man. We look forward to part 2 coming through.
Maybe I'll have another type of backdrop next time we do it, so all of the things, it won't just look like it's the same thing. I'll do that.
Sounds good, man. Well, thanks for coming through to Unique Access, Mr. Mixx.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having me.